Hi everyone, welcome to my YouTube channel. My name is Alex, I'm a fighting and retro game enthusiast, and in this episode I'm going to give you my review on Tekken for PS1. Tekken was released for the arcades by Namco in 1994 as an answer to Sega's Virtua Fighter. The game was actually developed by the team that had previously worked for Sega, and it was directed by Seiichi Ishii, who was a designer for Sega's Virtua Fighter. Tekken was later released for the PS1 console with some extra characters and FMVs, which I think had elevated the game quite a bit. The PS1 copy was a huge commercial success for the time, and I think rightfully so. It was one of the earliest games that were introduced in 3D, and it looked really different. I personally hadn't played the first Tekken at the time it came out. My first Tekken and the 3D game experience in general was Tekken 3, but judging by how I reacted to Tekken 3 back then, I understand why the first Tekken was such a success. It was fresh, it was dope.
When I finally played the first Tekken still back in the 90s, I gotta say it looked a bit shitty when compared to my experience with Tekken 3. The characters look really blocky and the environments are a huge splash of really big pixels on your TV. The camera is taking different angles during certain moves and it zooms in and out, giving the game a more cinematic feel to it. I mean, I know exactly how it must have felt for those who saw it for the first time when the camera suddenly changed angle. I know I lost my shit the first time I saw something like that. The arenas are based on real-world locations, with the names of the locations being displayed on the screen. This seemed to me a bit similar to Street Fighter when they show which country you're fighting in. I think it was a great trick to make the game feel more international. I've always liked this about fighting games. It made my young self mentally travel to those locations and take a break from my small town. The ground of the arenas is rotating in a way so that the characters can never hit a wall. This was quite different for a fighting game back then. There was no way to trap your opponent in a corner and finish them or throw them out of the ring. That alone was quite a game changer gameplay-wise. The backgrounds look very much like a wallpaper tapestry with no real depth, but somehow I don't mind that. I didn't appreciate it back then, but nowadays I think that overall the game looked quite good and interesting, particularly for its time. Remember, this was an era of experimentation and development of new techniques. So even though the graphics in Tekken look absolutely horrible by today's standards, I'll still give it credits for being one of the first games with 3D graphics.
You've probably noticed in my previous videos that I really like when a fighting game has a story and some sort of world building. Well, actually the Tekken series are largely responsible for that. To me personally, a fighting game with a story makes it feel like the whole thing has a purpose and is going somewhere. A story just makes everything feel bigger and more important. As I've mentioned earlier, the PS1 version has some FMVs for the characters' endings, as well as some info within the pages of its booklet. And man, there's a lot going on in here story-wise, and that's a good thing in my book.
Here's the main story. The owner of the big financial corporation called Mishima Zaibatsu, Heihachi, throws his 5-year-old son Kazuya off a cliff, just to see if his son is strong enough and worthy to inherit the family business. Kazuya survives the fall and climbs up, but the traumatic experience activates the devil gene in him, which grants him special powers. As if that wasn't enough stress for Kazuya, Heihachi adopted Lee Chaolan so that Kazuya has a rival to compete with. Kazuya grows up traveling the world and winning every martial arts tournament he competes in. He only has one draw with the American fighter Paul Phoenix, which sparks their rivalry. I mean, the similarities couldn't be more obvious. Eventually, Heihachi organizes the King of Iron Fist tournament that attracts the best fighters from all over the world. Heihachi's goal was to test Kazuya's strength. Thanks to the devil's powers, Kazuya defeats Heihachi and returns the long overdue favor by throwing Heihachi off a cliff. There's a bunch of other characters in the game, each one with their own storyline and FMV ending, that give us a better glimpse of the world of Tekken, but I think it would be too much to explore every character in one video. So let's have a look at the gameplay. Tekken was quite different from the other fighting games when it came out, as far as the controls are concerned. First thing you notice when you play it is that you are able to control each limb of your character. Combining the basic strikes with the directional buttons will result in different types of attacks. Each character is equipped with combos, unique moveset and throws. Although the graphics are 3D, and despite the camera occasionally taking different angles, the fights happen in 2D. As I've mentioned earlier, the ground rotates in a way so your characters can never reach the limits of the arenas. so there's really no way a fighter can be trapped in a corner. The game is really slow when compared to other titles of its time like Mortal Kombat or Street Fighter. Like, it's really slow. The recovery time after a failed attack or after you've been hit is quite long, allowing your opponent to easily punish you, so you have to be really careful and tactical in order to win the matches. It won't help you to simply button mash the controller. Despite Tekken trying to be more realistic than the other fighting games, the characters can still jump as high as Luigi. I know some people find it hilarious, but personally I didn't really mind that neither in Tekken 1 and 2 or the other Namco game that I previously reviewed, Soul Blade. There is an option menu where, amongst other settings, you can adjust the difficulty level. As far as the modes are going, there are only two: Arcade, which is the single player mode, and of course the VS player. In the arcade mode you fight through all of the main characters and then you fight a sub-boss. The sub-bosses are unique for each of the main characters. Once you beat a sub-boss, they become available to play as. I'd like to mention that in this game only the main characters have FMV endings. None of the extra characters have any. The final boss is Heihachi. Heihachi is quite challenging to beat, if I'm honest. Eventually he can also be unlocked if you manage to beat the game without using any continue. If you play as Heihachi, your final boss will be Kazuya in his devil form. You can also unlock Devil Kazuya by beating the Galaga game, which you can play just before the main game loads. Good f***ing luck with that. I tried to unlock Devil Kazuya, but eventually I gave up. It's really not worth my time wasting it on luck. The characters that I've enjoyed the most playing as in this game are Kazuya, Heihachi and Paul. Apart from their moveset, I just have a karate uniform fetish. I also like Law and Yoshimitsu. The music has always been one of Namco's strongest points. I really like the music in Tekken. It has that arcade video game meets anime feel to it. The melodies are all really memorable and I like the synthesizer sounds that are used for the music. Some tracks are uplifting and some are quite atmospheric. The music really blends the whole game together, it sets up the tone and really adds to that world building of the Tekken series.
As a musician myself, I'm really into the music in video games. I think it's extremely important and I can confidently say that the music in Tekken really nails it. My favorite tracks would be the themes of Antarctica, Kyoto, Japan, Marine Stadium, Japan and China. Those tracks really stand out for me.
The rest of the sounds like strikes, blocking, etc. are all recognizable and I'd say true and distinct to the Tekken series. The voice work screams Japanese, it's so anime, especially the girls' voices. Weird thing that I've noticed is that Kunimitsu has a dude's voice here. She basically has the same voice like Yoshimitsu.
In the end, I'd say that it would be wrong to judge this game based on today's standards. I wouldn't recommend it to casual players who were born in the mid-90s. People of that age can't possibly appreciate this game unless they are actual retro gaming enthusiasts. In that case, you can understand how important this game was for the evolution in graphics and gameplay, not only for fighting games but video games in general. This game is a motherfucking historic artifact that only the initiated will appreciate and enjoy it nowadays. I was lucky to be old enough in the 90s as I think that era was probably one of the most revolutionary in video games history, and I'm really glad I was able to experience all that unforgettable video games renaissance. I personally treat this game for what it is now, which is a time machine that allows me to revisit those nice days and feelings from the past. So this was my review on Tekken. If you enjoyed it, I'd really appreciate if you press all the available buttons to support my channel. Feel free to leave your comments below, check out my other videos, and see you next time!